In the heart of Manhattan, where neon lights pulse and the city's rhythm never slows, Emma Harper, 28, stood at the peak of a dream most women could only imagine. With golden blonde hair and eyes as bright as a summer sky, she was a brilliant financial analyst who could make numbers tell stories few could unravel. But today, it wasn't spreadsheets or million-dollar deals that set her heart racing. In just 24 hours, Emma would walk down the aisle in a breathtaking wedding gown to become the wife of James Thornton, the heir to Thornton Enterprises, a billion-dollar real estate empire that turned heads across New York. James was the picture of perfection. He had a smile that could charm any boardroom, eyes as deep as the ocean, and a way of speaking that made you feel like the only person in the world. He'd proposed to Emma under a blazing Hampton sunset, kneeling with a diamond ring that sparkled like a star. "You're everything I need," he'd whispered, and Emma believed him with every fiber of her being. 3 years together had spun a love story the press couldn't stop gushing over. Manhattan's golden couple, a symbol of romance and success. Emma's life seemed woven from threads of stardust. She loved how James held her hand at glittering galas, how he shared his plans to build skyscrapers bearing the Thornton name, and the quiet moments when they sat together in their penthouse overlooking Central Park, dreaming of a future filled with children's laughter. The Thornton family had welcomed her as their own. Margaret, James's mother, with her elegant silver hair and warm voice, always hugged Emma tightly, calling her "my daughter." She taught Emma how to brew tea the British way, shared stories of the Thornton ancestors, and even gifted her a pearl necklace, a family heirloom passed down through 3 generations. "You'll carry our legacy forward," Margaret said, her eyes gleaming with pride. Then there was Lily, James's 22-year-old sister, a burst of energy with a radiant smile. Lily and Emma became fast friends, shopping together on Fifth Avenue, giggling through bridal fittings, and swapping secrets over cocktails. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to James," Lily said once, hugging Emma tightly in a Madison Avenue bridal boutique. "You make our whole family happy." For Emma, this wasn't just a marriage, it was a promise of family, a place to belong after years of loneliness since losing her parents. The wedding was planned like a masterpiece. St. Patrick's Cathedral, a New York icon, had been booked a year in advance. Hundreds of white roses and South African orchids, flown in from around the globe, filled the air with their intoxicating scent. A Juilliard string quartet would play Emma's favorite, Canon in D, and a 7-tiered wedding cake was crafted by a renowned Parisian chef. Vogue dubbed it the wedding of the century, with 300 guests, including billionaires, Hollywood stars, and even New York's governor. Emma couldn't stop smiling, picturing the moment she'd walk down the aisle, James's eyes lighting up as they stepped into their forever. But the night before the wedding, as moonlight shimmered over Manhattan streets, everything changed. Emma, dressed in a cozy sweater and flats, decided to deliver her grandfather's pocket watch to James at the Waldorf Astoria, where he was hosting his bachelor party. It was a special gift Margaret wanted James to wear on their big day, a cherished Thornton heirloom. "He'll be so touched," Margaret had said with a warm smile, and Emma didn't want to let her future mother-in-law down. The Waldorf Astoria glowed like a palace, its uniformed staff greeting Emma like royalty. They knew her from the charity galas she and James had hosted there. "Mr. Thornton's in the VIP lounge out back," a staff member whispered, pointing the way. Emma glided through a marble hallway, her footsteps soft, her heart pounding with excitement. She imagined James's face breaking into a grin when she surprised him, maybe pulling her into a hug and teasing her for not waiting until tomorrow. But as she neared the carved wooden door of the VIP lounge, a sharp, familiar laugh stopped her cold. It was James's laugh, warm but edged with an arrogance she'd never noticed before. The door was slightly ajar, enough for his words to spill out clearly. "Come on, guys." James's voice rang out, slurred with a hint of liquor. "You think I'm really tying myself to Emma forever?" Emma's heart froze. She stood rooted to the spot, clutching the velvet box with the pocket watch, as if it were the only thing keeping her from shattering. "What do you mean?" Another voice, probably Mike, James's best friend, chimed in with a chuckle. "She's the total package, man. Gorgeous, smart, and loaded." James laughed again, a cold, cutting sound that turned Emma's blood to ice. "Oh, she's perfect. On paper, her trust fund's gonna bankroll Thornton Enterprises' push into Europe, and her connections? Pure gold. But she's just a stepping stone, boys. A pawn to get me higher. When someone better comes along, someone who's really worth it, I'll trade up." The laughter from James's friends echoed like a chorus of demons. But for Emma, the world around her had already crumbled. 3 years of love, Promises, embraces, and shared dreams now exposed as nothing more than a carefully staged play. She stood frozen in the opulent hallway of the Waldorf Astoria, feeling the floor melt beneath her feet. But instead of tears, a quiet fire began to smolder inside her. James Thornton hadn't just betrayed her love, he'd turned her into a tool. And Emma Harper was not the kind of woman who let anyone reduce her to a pawn in their game. Back in the penthouse overlooking Central Park, New York's skyline twinkled like lost stars. But Emma no longer saw its magic. Just hours ago, she'd been a bride-to-be dreaming of a blissful life with James Thornton. Now, she sat on a plush leather sofa, the velvet box holding James's grandfather's pocket watch lying abandoned beside her, a bitter reminder of the betrayal she'd overheard at the Waldorf Astoria. His words looped in her mind like a scratched record. She's just temporary, a stepping stone to climb higher. Her heart ached, but no tears came. Instead, a cold, razor-sharp anger swelled in her chest. Emma wasn't one to let emotions drown her. She stood, walked to her walnut desk, and flipped open her laptop. If James thought she was some naive girl he could manipulate, he was dead wrong. As a financial analyst, Emma had access to Thornton Enterprises systems, a privilege James had once bragged about when introducing her to his partners. "Emma's the brain behind the numbers," he'd said, his smile gleaming as if she were a prized jewel. Now, that brain was about to become his worst nightmare. She started digging through internal emails, documents she'd once ignored because she trusted James. But this time, she viewed them through the lens of betrayal. Within minutes, she stumbled on a string of encrypted emails sent from James's personal account to an unfamiliar address, vanessa.rose@consultrose.com. The name rang a bell. Vanessa Rose, a sharp-edged business associate of Thornton Enterprises, with fiery red hair and eyes that always seemed to hide something. Emma had met her at cocktail parties, where Vanessa stood a little too close to James, her smile cutting like a blade. Emma had brushed off any doubts, convincing herself it was just the confidence of a successful woman. Now she saw how blind she'd been. Her heart pounded as she clicked the first email. "V, everything's on track," James wrote. "She'll sign over the trust fund right after the wedding. Then we can funnel the money to the Cayman account. No questions asked. Just be patient, my love." Emma's face burned. My love? This wasn't just a dirty business scheme. It was an affair right under her nose. She kept reading, each email a fresh stab to her heart. James and Vanessa had been planning for months, using Emma's trust fund to bankroll shady projects, then cutting her out once she was no longer useful. One email even said, "She trusts me completely, V. When it's all done, I'll find an excuse to end it. A quick divorce will do the trick." Emma snapped the laptop shut, her breath shaky. She hadn't just been cheated on, she'd been played as a pawn in James's financial chess game. But what hurt most was the truth that every moment she'd cherished, their cozy nights by the fireplace, their Napa Valley getaways, their promises under the moonlight, had been a lie. James didn't love her. He loved what she could give him: money, connections, and a polished image for the Thornton empire. She stood and walked to the window, gazing down at the bustling traffic on Fifth Avenue. New York never slept, and now neither would Emma. She needed to act, but she had to be smarter than James, smarter than Vanessa. Grabbing B-New as dawn broke, painting New York's sky a fiery orange, Emma stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were bloodshot from a sleepless night, but her gaze was sharp, brimming with resolve. She was no longer the naive girl who'd fallen for James Thornton. She was Emma Harper, and she'd make him pay, not with tears, but with the truth. She grabbed her phone, checking Ryan's message. "I've looked into a few things. If you've got evidence, this'll be the biggest bombshell Wall Street's ever seen." Emma's lips curled into a smile, not warm, but razor-edged. James wanted to play a game of chess? Fine. This time, she'd make the final move. The first rays of her wedding day streamed through the penthouse windows, bathing Emma Harper in golden light, but her heart felt no warmth. In just a few hours, she was supposed to slip into her Vera Wang gown and walk into St. Patrick's Cathedral to become Mrs. James Thornton before hundreds of admiring eyes. But after last night's revelations, James's cruel words at his bachelor party, the damning emails with Vanessa Rose, and Lily's suspicious hesitation, that dream had shattered like crystal on a marble floor. Instead of preparing for a wedding, Emma was gearing up for battle, and she had no intention of losing. Her laptop still glowed on the desk, displaying the trove of documents she'd gathered through the night. Thornton Enterprises' shady transactions, offshore accounts in the Caymans, and the email chain between James and Vanessa read like a ledger of sins, each line a dagger to her trust. But Emma refused to drown in pain. She'd contacted Ryan Carter, New York's sharpest investigative journalist, and their meeting this morning at the coffee shop on 57th Street would be the first step in her plan. James thought he could use her as a pawn. She'd show him who owned this board. Before leaving the apartment, Emma made sure everything was airtight. She printed the key emails, neatly tucked them into a cream-colored envelope, and hid it in a secret drawer in her vanity. She knew James had a habit of snooping through her phone when she wasn't looking, and she couldn't afford a single slip-up. As she double-checked her work, the doorbell chimed, startling her. Who would show up now at 7 a.m.? Peering through the peephole, her breath caught. It was Margaret, James's mother, wrapped in a luxurious fur coat, her smile radiant. Emma took a deep breath, opened the door, and forced her warmest smile. "Margaret, you're here early," she said, keeping her tone light. Margaret swept in, enveloping Emma in a tight hug, the faint scent of Chanel swirling around her. "My dear, I couldn't wait another minute. Today's your big day with James. I brought something special." She pulled a small, velvet-lined box from her purse, revealing a pair of shimmering pearl earrings. "These belonged to James's grandmother. She wore them on her wedding day, and now I want you to wear them." Emma stared at the earrings, feeling their weight press against her heart. Margaret's kindness was genuine, but every word, every gesture now reminded her of James's deceit. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging Margaret to hide the tears welling in her eyes. But as Margaret began sharing stories of Thornton family traditions, one comment stopped Emma cold. "You know, Thornton Enterprises hasn't always had smooth sailing. When James's father was alive, we nearly lost everything a few times because of mistakes. But James learned from them, and you'll help him carry this legacy forward." Margaret smiled, but Emma caught a flicker of hesitation in her voice as if she were guarding a secret. "What kind of mistakes?" Emma asked, her tone soft but pointed. Margaret froze, her eyes flashing with brief panic before she laughed it off. "Oh, just old business hiccups, dear. Nothing to worry about on such a happy day." But Emma didn't let it slide. She sensed another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Thornton Enterprises wasn't just James's playground. It had a darker history, and she needed to dig deeper. After Margaret left with final well wishes for the big day, Emma hurried to prepare for her meeting with Ryan. She threw on a simple trench coat, tucked the envelope of documents into her bag, and slipped out of the apartment before James or anyone else could show up. The coffee shop on 57th Street was a cozy nook amid Manhattan's bustle, filled with the aroma of freshly roasted beans and soft jazz. Ryan was already there, tucked in a corner with an espresso and a notepad. With his tousled hair and hawk-like eyes, he was the kind of guy who could sniff out a scandal from miles away. "Hey, Emma," Ryan said, sliding a chair out for her. "Judging by your face, this isn't just a lover's quarrel." Emma gave a thin smile, pulled the envelope from her bag, and set it in front of him. "Read it, you'll see." Ryan flipped through the pages, his brows knitting tighter with each one. When he reached the emails between James and Vanessa, he let out a low whistle. "Holy hell, Emma, this isn't just some jerk cheating on his fiancée. This is fraud on a massive scale. If this checks out, Thornton Enterprises is toast, and James Thornton won't just lose you, he'll lose everything." Emma nodded, her voice ice cold. "I want you to break this story, Ryan, but not today. I want it to hit right at the wedding, in front of everyone, his partners, his family, the press. James thinks he can play me. I'll show him I play better." Ryan studied her, his expression a mix of admiration and concern. "You sure about this? You're not just crashing a wedding, you're torching an empire. And your own life, too." Emma sipped her coffee, her gaze unflinching. "He burned my life down last night. Now it's my turn." Emma's plan nearly unraveled that very night. After meeting Ryan, she slipped into Thornton Enterprises' offices to retrieve documents she suspected James had hidden in his personal safe. It was late, the building nearly deserted, with only the hum of air conditioning and the cold glow of fluorescent lights. Using a spare key James had given her as a sign of trust, Emma crept into his office. She just cracked the safe and pulled out a mysterious USB drive when the lights snapped on. James stood in the doorway, his shirt untucked, eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Emma, what are you doing here?" Her heart pounded, but she quickly shut the safe and flashed a sweet smile. "Honey, I was looking for a surprise gift I planned to give you tomorrow. Guess I got the wrong spot." She stepped closer, resting a hand on his chest, keeping her voice effortlessly calm. James studied her, his gaze probing, as if searching for a crack in her story. "Sneaking around the night before our wedding?" he said, half joking, half sharp. "Don't make me worry, Emma." She laughed, brushing a light kiss on his cheek to hide her trembling hands. "Never, babe. I'm heading home to rest. Big day tomorrow." As she left the office, her back was slick with sweat. James didn't know she'd taken the USB, but she could tell he was suspicious. She had to move faster before he sniffed out her plan. Back at the penthouse, Emma plugged the USB into her laptop, and what she found stole her breath. It wasn't just fraudulent transactions, there was a detailed scheme by James and Vanessa to sell off Thornton Enterprises' shares to a foreign conglomerate, leaving hundreds of employees jobless and investors wiped out. But what stopped her cold was a final note. After the wedding, make sure Emma's no longer a problem. An accident would be cleaner than a divorce. Emma slammed the laptop shut, her breathing heavy. James didn't just want to use her, he was ready to erase her entirely, but she wouldn't give him the chance. She called Ryan, her voice steely. "One more thing, Ryan. I want FBI agents at the cathedral tomorrow, and make sure every camera's rolling. James Thornton's not just losing his reputation, he's losing his freedom." As she hung up, her eyes glinted with icy resolve. Tomorrow, she'd walk into that church, not as a bride, but as a storm ready to tear down everything James had built. St. Patrick's Cathedral, Manhattan's majestic landmark, glowed that morning under golden sunlight and the scent of white roses. Hundreds of guests in tailored suits and extravagant gowns filled the walnut pews, murmuring about the wedding of the century. Vogue was there with a photography crew, lenses trained on the main aisle, poised to capture Emma Harper's grand entrance in her dazzling Vera Wang gown. The symphony orchestra struck up Canon in D, its gentle notes floating like a promise of eternal love. But inside Emma, there was no love, no promise, only a tempest waiting to break free. In the cathedral's bridal suite, Emma stood steady, her hands unshaking as she adjusted her delicate veil. The cream-colored envelope holding the truth about James Thornton, his betraying emails, fraudulent deals, and sinister plan with Vanessa Rose, was tucked discreetly inside her gown, pressed against her thigh. Last night, after nearly getting caught in James's office, Emma had worked with Ryan until dawn, ensuring every detail of her plan was flawless. Ryan had looped in the FBI, and a team of agents was stationed outside the cathedral, blending into the swarm of reporters. Today, James wouldn't just lose her, he'd lose everything. Lily, James's sister, burst into the room, her champagne-colored bridesmaid dress shimmering. "Emma, you look like an angel," she squealed, throwing her arms around her. But Emma's smile was thin, her eyes searching. After last night's phone call, she wasn't sure whose side Lily was on. "Thanks, Lily," she said, her voice soft but cool. But as Lily left to lead the bridal party, Margaret entered, the pearl earrings she'd gifted Emma gleaming in her hand. "My dear, today's your day," Margaret said, her eyes misty. "James is so lucky to have you." Emma hugged her heart heavy. She wanted to scream the truth, to tell Margaret her son didn't deserve anyone's love, but she held back. Margaret would know soon enough, along with the rest of the world. When the cathedral doors swung open, the music shifted to the wedding march. 300 pairs of eyes turned to Emma as she stepped onto the aisle, each footfall echoing like a drumbeat of fate. Her gown hugged her frame, sparkling under the light from stained glass windows. But her eyes weren't those of a joyful bride. They were sharp, resolute, like a warrior heading into battle. At the end of the aisle, James stood tall, devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, his confident smile radiating as if he'd already conquered the world. He had no idea that in minutes his world would collapse. Emma approached, feeling the weight of the guests' stares, Wall Street tycoons, Hollywood stars, even New York's governor, like invisible arrows. She spotted Vanessa Rose in the third row, striking in a bold red dress, her smug expression screaming victory. Next to her sat Mike, James's best friend, who'd laughed when James called her temporary. Emma kept her smile flawless, but inside she was counting down. When she reached James, he took her hand, whispering, "You look stunning, Emma." His voice was honey-sweet, but she heard the falseness in it, like an actor playing the perfect groom. The priest began, his voice warm and resonant. "We are gathered today to witness the union of Emma Harper and James Thornton." But before he could continue, Emma raised a hand, cutting him off. "Excuse me, Father," she said, her voice clear and commanding, ringing through the cathedral. "Before we proceed, I have something to say." James's brow furrowed, his smile faltering. "Sweetheart, what's this about?" he asked, his tone low but laced with unease. Emma turned to face the crowd, her gaze sweeping over every face, Margaret, Lily, Vanessa, Mike, and the reporters with their cameras rolling. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, she began, her voice calm but cutting like a blade. But last night, I learned the truth about the man I was going to marry. And I think everyone here deserves to know it too. Emma pulled the envelope from her wedding gown, the rustle of paper cutting through the deathly silence of the cathedral. James's face drained of color, his hand clamping onto her wrist. Emma, don't do something crazy, he hissed, his voice trembling. But she yanked free, stepping forward to the center of the altar, holding the envelope high. These are emails between James Thornton and Vanessa Rose, she declared, her voice booming like thunder. In them, James calls me a temporary pawn, a tool to seize my trust fund, but that's not all. She opened the envelope, pulling out the first sheet. Let me read. V. Once Emma signs the contract, we'll move $50 million to the Cayman account. She suspects nothing. Then we can upgrade. Those are James's words, sent to Vanessa, who's sitting right there. She pointed directly at Vanessa, prompting every head in the room to swivel. Vanessa shot to her feet, her face ashen, but before she could speak, Emma pressed on. And here's proof of Thornton Enterprises' offshore accounts, fraudulent deals that wiped out hundreds of investors. And worse, James's plan to deal with me after the wedding, an accident so he wouldn't have to bother with a divorce. A wave of gasps and murmurs erupted. Margaret covered her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Lily burst into tears, shaking her head in disbelief. Mike stared at the floor, dodging every gaze. James lunged for Emma, trying to snatch the envelope. "She's lying!" he roared, his voice cracking. "She's making it up to ruin me!" But Emma stepped back, tossing the documents to the floor, where they scattered like poisoned snowflakes. "The FBI's here, James," she said, her voice ice cold. "They have everything I have, and more." At that moment, the cathedral doors burst open. 4 FBI agents in dark suits strode in, guns holstered, their eyes hard. "James Thornton," one agent announced, his voice ringing like a gavel. "You're under arrest for financial fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit harm." Handcuffs gleamed as they approached, pulling James from the altar. He thrashed, screaming, "Emma, you'll regret this. You can't do this to me." But she stood tall, watching him being dragged away, his smug smile now just a ghost. Vanessa tried to slip out a side door, but Ryan Carter, blending in with the reporters, blocked her with a sly grin. "Going somewhere, Ms. Rose?" he asked, as news cameras zeroed in on her. Vanessa stammered, but there was no escape. Flashes popped relentlessly, capturing every second of her and James's downfall. Emma turned to the crowd, her eyes no longer just angry, they blazed with triumph. "I loved James Thornton," she said, her voice carrying through the priest's microphone. "But he didn't love me. He loved money, power, and lies. Today, I'm not getting married, but I'm taking back my freedom. And the truth always wins." She dropped her bouquet of roses to the floor and walked out of the cathedral, leaving behind a storm of chaos, Margaret's sobs, James's shouts, and the relentless whir of cameras. Outside, New York's sunlight greeted her like an old friend. Ryan stood waiting, handing her a coffee from a nearby food truck. "You did it, Emma," he said, his eyes full of admiration. "The world's gonna be talking about this." Emma took a sip, feeling like she could finally breathe after months of suffocation. "Good," she replied, her voice firm, "because I'm not done yet." St. Patrick's Cathedral, moments ago a stage for a century's grandest wedding, now resembled the aftermath of an explosion. James Thornton's shouts still echoed faintly as the FBI hauled him away in cuffs, his handsome face twisted with rage and panic. Vanessa Rose, her once vibrant red dress now crumpled, had vanished through a side exit, but not before her desperate glance locked with Emma's, a mix of hatred and fear. Inside, 300 guests stood stunned, phones raised, news cameras flashing, capturing the biggest collapse Manhattan had ever seen. Yet amid the chaos, Emma felt an eerie calm. She'd unleashed the truth, and though it burned, she'd never felt so free. She stepped out of the cathedral, her Vera Wang gown shimmering in the New York sun, each stride carrying the strength of a victor. Ryan Carter, the investigative journalist, waited outside with a grin that was half awe, half disbelief. "Emma, you just turned Wall Street to ashes," he said, passing her a coffee from a food truck. "X is blowing up, and CNN's already calling this the scandal of the decade." Emma sipped, her eyes flashing with a sharp glint. "Good," she said. "I want them to remember nobody gets to toy with the truth." But Emma's victory was short-lived. Hours later, back at the penthouse overlooking Central Park, reality began to sink in. Her phone buzzed nonstop, texts from friends, reporters, even random numbers begging for interviews. She scrolled through headlines online. Runaway bride exposes Thornton empire. James Thornton arrested at his own wedding. Billion-dollar fraud rocks New York. Thornton Enterprises, once Manhattan's pride, teetered on the brink of collapse. Its stock plummeted 60% in hours, investors pulled out en masse, and hundreds of employees faced an uncertain future. Emma knew she'd done the right thing, but she hadn't anticipated the fallout would spread so far. That evening, as she slipped out of her wedding gown, the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Margaret, James's mother, her usual warmth replaced by a stony glare. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her gaze was icy. "How could you do this to our family, Emma?" she demanded, her voice trembling with fury. "You destroyed everything, James, the company, our legacy. Who do you think you are, standing up like that?" Emma froze, her heart twisting. She'd once seen Margaret as a mother, dreamed of cozy afternoons, sipping tea and sharing family stories. Now, Margaret looked at her like an enemy. "Margaret, I never wanted to hurt you," Emma said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "But James lied to me, to everyone. He didn't just betray me, he stole from your company." Margaret shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand, Emma. James is my son. I poured my life into him. And you turned him into a criminal in front of the world." She turned away, stepping into the elevator without looking back, leaving Emma standing there, feeling as if a piece of her heart had been ripped away. The next morning, Emma got an unexpected text from Lily, James's sister. "Emma, I need to see you. Please." They agreed to meet at a small diner in Greenwich Village, a quiet spot where no one would recognize them amid the bustling crowd. Lily showed up with puffy eyes and disheveled blonde hair, a far cry from the radiant bridesmaid of yesterday. "I'm so sorry," she said the moment she sat down, her voice choking. "I knew James was up to something wrong, but I didn't dare say anything. I was scared of losing him, losing our family. But you were right. He's a monster." Emma studied Lily, torn between pity and suspicion. "Why didn't you tell me, Lily? You knew about Vanessa, didn't you?" she asked, her tone soft but pointed. Lily stared down at her latte, her hands gripping the cup tightly. "I saw them at the office late a few times. James said it was just work, but I knew something was off. I wanted to tell you, but I wasn't brave enough." She looked up, eyes brimming with tears. "You were family to me, Emma, and I let you get hurt. I'll never forgive myself." Emma stayed quiet, watching the young woman before her. She wanted to be angry, but she saw the sincerity in Lily's eyes. "You're not James," she said finally, "and I don't want to lose you, but from now on, no more secrets." Lily nodded, throwing her arms around Emma, and for the first time that day, Emma felt a flicker of hope that not everything about the Thornton family was a lie, but the storm wasn't over. By the end of the week, as Emma tried to piece her life back together in an apartment still filled with unthrown wedding flowers, a group of men in dark suits showed up at her door. They introduced themselves as representatives of Thornton Enterprises business partners, who'd lost millions in the scandal. Their leader, a man named Victor Malone with a chilling smile, sat on her sofa like he owned the place. "Ms. Harper, you've made quite a mess," he said, his voice low and menacing. "We don't care about your little love story with Thornton, but if you don't retract your accusations and make restitution, you'll find this won't end with just headlines." Emma stood tall, her gaze unflinching. "You think threatening me will shut me up?" she asked, her voice sharp as a blade. "James stole from you, not me. If you want your money, talk to him in prison." Victor laughed, but his eyes darkened. "You're a tough one, Ms. Harper, but be careful. New York's a big city, but accidents happen all the time." He stood, leaving a business card on the table, and walked out with his entourage. Emma locked the door, her heart racing, but fear wasn't in her vocabulary anymore. She'd faced James Thornton, Victor Malone was just another bully, and she wouldn't let him win. That night, Emma called Ryan Carter. "I need another favor," she said, her voice resolute. "Victor Malone and James's partners, they're trying to silence me. Dig into them. If they're tied to James, I want the world to know." Ryan let out a whistle over the phone. "You don't take a break, do you?" "All right, I'm on it. But Emma, watch your back. Guys like Malone don't play nice." Emma smiled, gazing out at New York's twinkling skyline. "They don't know I don't either," she replied. She opened her laptop and began drafting a public statement for major outlets: the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN. She didn't just recount what happened at the cathedral. She called on Thornton Enterprises victims to speak out. "The truth doesn't stop with James Thornton," she wrote. "It lives in all of us who refuse to bow to lies." As she hit send, she knew she'd opened a new chapter, not just of revenge, but of fighting for justice. James may have caged her in a web of deceit, but now she was free, and no one would drag her back. 2 months after the scandal that rocked St. Patrick's Cathedral, Manhattan, no longer buzzed about the wedding of the century. Instead, Emma Harper's name dominated headlines, from the New York Times to Forbes, hailed as the woman who toppled the Thornton empire. Thornton Enterprises, once New York's real estate jewel, was a hollow shell. Its Park Avenue headquarters shuttered, employees laid off in droves, and James Thornton awaiting trial in federal prison. But for Emma, the media spotlight brought no joy. She defeated James, but the victory left an ache where love, family, and dreams once lived. Emma didn't stay in the Central Park penthouse. It held too many ghosts of James, candlelit dinners, whispered promises, all lies. She moved to a smaller apartment in Brooklyn, with windows facing the East River and crisp white walls, a blank canvas for her new story. She sold the diamond engagement ring, using the money to launch Harper Integrity, a consulting firm focused on business ethics. "No company should be built on lies," she declared at the press conference for its launch, standing before a crowd of curious reporters and executives. "Harper Integrity will help businesses do right from the start." Harper Integrity quickly became a sensation. Companies, from Silicon Valley startups to Wall Street giants, flocked to Emma to avoid becoming the next Thornton Enterprises. She worked tirelessly, developing training programs, analyzing fraud risks, and advising CEOs eager to keep their reputations spotless. But what set Harper Integrity apart wasn't just expertise, it was Emma's story. People saw her as a symbol, a woman who rose from ashes, turning pain into power. Forbes dubbed her the redefiner of justice in business. And a photo of her speaking at a podium, eyes sharp yet warm, went viral across social media. Not everyone cheered her on, though. Victor Malone, James's old business partner, didn't vanish as Emma had hoped. One morning, while she was meeting a major client at her new Dumbo office, an anonymous email landed in her inbox. "Think you've won, Harper? Retract your testimony or there'll be consequences." Attached was a photo of her leaving her apartment the previous night, taken from a shadowy corner. Her blood ran cold, but panic wasn't her style anymore. She'd faced James Thornton. Victor was just another shark in New York's ocean. She called Ryan Carter, now a trusted ally. "Victor's playing dirty," she said over the phone, her voice unwavering. "I need you to find out how deep he's tied to James." Ryan, sitting in his cluttered midtown office, chuckled. "You ever take a day off? All right, I'll dig. But Emma, get some security. Guys like Malone don't mess around." Emma smiled, gazing out her office window at the sunlight glinting off the East River. "I don't need bodyguards, Ryan. I've got the truth." But Emma's biggest challenge came not from Victor, but from a ghost of her past. Vanessa Rose. One evening, as Emma watched the news, she froze when Vanessa appeared on CNBC, her red hair dyed brunette, introducing herself as Victoria Reed, a corporate restructuring expert working for a Chicago finance firm. "We need to rebuild trust in business," Vanessa said, her smile polished, as if the Thornton scandal had never touched her. Emma snapped off the TV, her hand gripping the remote. Vanessa hadn't just dodged justice, she was daring to rebuild her career on the ruins she'd helped create. Emma couldn't let her get away with it. She contacted Ryan, asking him to investigate Vanessa's new identity. While awaiting results, she received an unexpected invitation to speak as the keynote at an international business conference in Boston. "We want your story," the organizers wrote. "You inspire those who stand for justice." Emma accepted. But when she scanned the speaker list, one name chilled her: Victoria Reed. Vanessa would be there, and Emma knew this was her chance to face her down. On the day of the conference, Boston glowed under crisp autumn sunlight, but the auditorium buzzed with tension. Emma stepped onto the stage in a sharp navy suit, her eyes sweeping over hundreds of attendees, CEOs, journalists, and Vanessa, seated in the front row, her smug smile gleaming. "I'm not here today because I'm strong," Emma began, her voice resonating. "I'm here because I learned the truth, however painful, is always stronger than lies." She shared her story without holding back, from her love for James to the moment she exposed him at the cathedral. The audience hung on her words, some wiping tears. Then she locked eyes with Vanessa. "But the truth doesn't stop with one person," she continued, her voice cutting like steel. "It demands we confront everyone who chooses lies for profit, like the woman who was James Thornton's accomplice. Now sitting here under a fake name, Victoria Reed. The room erupted in murmurs. Vanessa shot to her feet, her face pale. "You have no proof," she shouted, but Emma just smiled, holding up a USB drive. "I have everything, Vanessa. Emails, transactions, and testimonies from people you manipulated. The FBI would love a chat." Security stepped in, escorting Vanessa out amid boos from the crowd. News cameras flashed relentlessly, and Twitter exploded with hashtag Emma vs. Vanessa. As Emma stepped off the stage, she felt lighter, as if she'd shed the last weight of her past. Ryan, waiting in the wings, gave her a thumbs up. "You're their nightmare, Harper," he said, grinning. Emma smiled back, her first truly radiant smile in months. Back in New York, Emma got a call from Lily. "I want to help you," Lily said, her voice brimming with resolve. "I've been digging through old company files. There's stuff about Victor Malone you need to know." Emma nodded over the phone, her heart warming. She wasn't alone anymore. From the ashes of the scandal, she'd built a new purpose, not just for herself, but for everyone who believed in truth. And she knew, no matter the challenges ahead, she was ready to face them with a strength no one, James, Vanessa, or Victor, could take away. That winter, a blanket of pristine snow draped New York, as if the city were trying to renew itself after a storm of scandals. Emma Harper, now a name Wall Street revered, walked Manhattan's streets with newfound confidence. Harper Integrity, her business ethics consultancy, had become an industry leader, with offices stretching from Brooklyn to San Francisco. Her speeches at global conferences were in high demand, and hashtag Truth by Harper still trended on Twitter after her takedown of Vanessa Rose in Boston. But despite the spotlight's glare, Emma felt an emptiness inside. Where love once lived, now only scars remained from James Thornton's betrayal. One January afternoon, as snowflakes drifted outside her Dumbo office window, Emma received an invitation to guest lecture at Columbia Business School. "We want our students to learn from someone who's reshaped how we view business ethics," the dean's email read. Emma agreed, unaware that the talk would spark a new chapter in her life. In Columbia's brightly lit auditorium, she stood before hundreds of students and faculty, sharing her story, from the betrayed bride to the woman who toppled a fraudulent empire. The audience hung on her words, but one gaze caught her off guard. A man, about 35, with tousled brown hair and warm brown eyes, sitting in the front row, jotting down every word she said. After the lecture, he approached to shake her hand. "Ethan Parker," he introduced himself, his voice low but friendly. "I'm a professor researching business ethics here. Your talk. It was truly inspiring, Ms. Harper." Emma smiled, but she kept her guard up. She was used to flattery, and after James, trust didn't come easily. "Thank you," she replied, polite but cool. Ethan seemed to sense her caution, but pressed on. "I'm working on a project to prevent corporate fraud at its roots. I think you could bring a real-world perspective we're missing. Would you maybe grab a coffee and talk it over?" Emma started to decline, but something in Ethan's eyes, not flirtation, but genuine sincerity, made her nod. They met at a cozy Upper West Side cafe, where the scent of fresh waffles mingled with soft jazz piano. Ethan spoke about his work, his passion for building a generation of honest leaders. Then, unexpectedly, he opened up about himself. "I lost everything to fraud once," he said, his gaze distant. "My old business partner embezzled millions, leaving me buried in debt. I stopped trusting people for a long time, until I read about you." Emma froze. For the first time, she met someone who understood the sting of betrayal, not through empty platitudes, but through lived experience. Their coffee meetups became a routine. Ethan wasn't like James, no flash, no honeyed words, but he listened, asking questions that made her think. They collaborated on his Columbia project, designing business ethics courses inspired by the Thornton case. Emma felt a connection growing, but whenever Ethan inched closer, a gentle hand on hers, an invitation to dinner, she pulled back. James had left her with a fear of trusting, of loving, of being hurt again. The drama escalated when Emma uncovered something that shook her. While reviewing project files, she found old emails between Ethan and a finance firm loosely tied to Thornton Enterprises. The messages were harmless, academic exchanges, but the Thornton name hit her like a punch. She confronted Ethan in his Columbia office, her voice icy. "You knew James Thornton, didn't you? Are you here for the project or something else?" Ethan looked stunned, shaking his head. "Emma, no. Those emails were from 3 years ago, when I was researching real estate firms. I didn't know him beyond what's in the news. I came to you because I believe in you, nothing else." But Emma wasn't ready to trust. She left his office, her heart in knots. That night, alone in her Brooklyn apartment, she watched snow fall outside, wondering if her past was poisoning her present. She called Lily, now a close friend, after siding with her in the scandal. "I don't know Ethan, but I know you," Lily said over the phone. "You're stronger than anyone, but you deserve to be happy. Don't let James steal that chance." Lily's words cut through the darkness, making Emma realize she couldn't live forever in fear. The next morning, Emma sought Ethan out at Columbia. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I let my past blind me. I'm not promising I'll trust easily, but I want to try with you." Ethan smiled, not a triumphant grin, but one of quiet relief. "I'm not in a rush, Emma. I just want to be here, with you." And just as Emma began to open her heart, a new challenge loomed. Harper Integrity landed a major contract with a Seattle tech conglomerate, but as she dug into their records, she discovered they'd once done business with Victor Malone, James's old partner, who was still threatening her. Worse, Malone sent her a message. "Congrats on the new deal, Harper, but you know what I want. Back off, or I'll show the world you're as dirty as Thornton." And attached was a forged document accusing Emma of embezzling from Thornton Enterprises before exposing James. Fury surged through her. Malone wasn't just threatening, he was trying to smear her, to paint her as a villain in the public eye. She called a meeting with Harper Integrity's team, including Ryan Carter, now an unofficial advisor. "We're not letting Malone win," she declared, her voice resolute. "Ryan, find everything you can on him. Every dollar he's made, every word he said." Ryan nodded, his eyes glinting with excitement. "You're a force of nature, Emma. I'll dig to the bottom of this." Ethan offered to help too. "I'm no lawyer or journalist, but I know data," he said. "If Malone left a trail, I'll help you find it." Emma looked at him, feeling the sincerity in his words, and for the first time, she didn't feel alone in this fight. They worked late into the night, poring over documents, and uncovered a game changer. Malone had taken bribes from Thornton Enterprises to cover up James's offshore deals. This was the knockout punch Emma needed. Determined to expose Malone's corruption, Emma organized a surprise press conference in Manhattan, inviting every major outlet, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, Bloomberg. Standing before dozens of microphones, she held up the documents implicating Malone. "Victor Malone thought he could intimidate me," she declared, her voice resounding. "But the truth can't be bought. This is proof he colluded with James Thornton, and I won't stop until every liar pays the price." The crowd erupted in applause, while Malone, watching the live broadcast from his office, slammed his fist on his desk in fury. He knew he'd lost. As Emma stepped off the podium, Ethan was waiting, his eyes shining with pride. "You didn't just save your company," he said. "You're changing the world." Emma smiled, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. She made no promises to Ethan, but deep down, she knew she was ready to love again, not with fear, but with hope. By spring 2027, New York bloomed with fresh green, as if the city were exhaling after a long winter. Emma Harper, now an icon of resilience and justice, walked Manhattan streets with a confidence that was no longer sharp-edged but grounded. Harper Integrity had become a gold standard in business ethics consulting, securing contracts from Tokyo to London. The takedown of Victor Malone at the press conference forced him to retreat from the financial world, and #truth. By Harper remained a social media sensation, but in Emma's heart, a new chapter was unfolding, not just her career, but her love with Ethan Parker, the man who'd helped her learn to trust again. Yet the past never let go easily. One April morning, as Emma prepared for a lecture at Columbia Business School, she received a letter by mail, a rarity in the email era. The envelope bore no sender's name, but the sharp, familiar handwriting stopped her cold. She opened it, and each word dragged her back to that fateful wedding day 3 years ago. "Emma, I was released early for good behavior. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need to see you, just once, to say thank you. James Thornton." James Thornton. The name that once meant everything to her was now just an old nightmare. Sentenced to 7 years for fraud and conspiracy, he'd apparently earned early release. Emma tossed the letter onto her desk, her breath heavy. She'd rebuilt her life from the ashes he left, her company, her reputation, her love with Ethan. So why did a single letter make the ground feel unsteady? She called Lily, now running a charity for fraud victims inspired by Emma's story. "James contacted me," Emma said, her voice calm but tense. "He wants to meet." Lily was quiet for a moment, then sighed. He's changed, Emma. In prison, he wrote me letters about helping other inmates understand the cost of their crimes. But you don't owe him anything. If you don't want to see him, I'll tell him. Emma nodded over the phone, but a nagging question lingered. Had she truly escaped James, or did he still have the power to pull her back? The drama escalated when Emma received an email from a major New York publisher. They'd sent her a manuscript titled Redemption Behind Bars, authored by James Thornton. We'd like you to review and comment before publication, the email read. Mr. Thornton's story mentions you extensively, and we believe you deserve a voice. Emma's heart pounded as she opened the file. James chronicled his prison journey, from an arrogant man who thought himself untouchable to one who grasped the value of truth. He described Emma as the fire that burned me down, but also the light that guided me back. She shut her laptop, emotion swirling. Was this genuine remorse or just another scheme to exploit her? She decided to meet James, not to forgive, but to close that chapter for good. They arranged to meet at a small Harlem cafe, a place where no one would know them. Ethan, though worried, supported her. I trust you, Emma, he said, squeezing her hand before she left. But if he tries anything, call me. Emma smiled, drawing strength from his love, a love that didn't demand or manipulate, but lifted her up. James appeared in a simple sweater, a far cry from the tuxedo-clad Titan of old. He was thinner, his hair flecked with gray, his eyes no longer sharp but subdued, as if they'd seen too much. Thank you for coming, Emma, he said, his voice hoarse. I don't deserve your time, but I need to speak. Emma sat across from him, gripping her coffee, her gaze unwavering. Say it, James, but don't expect me to believe a word. James took a deep breath and began. In prison, I lost everything, money, status, freedom. But what hurt most was realizing I lost you, not because you left, but because I didn't deserve you. What you did that day, it destroyed me, but it also saved me. I started teaching other inmates about the consequences of fraud, using our story as a lesson. I wrote the book not to atone, but to remind myself never to be that man again. He slid a copy of the manuscript across the table. You can stop it. I won't publish if you don't want me to. Emma stared at the manuscript. Her heart tangled. She wanted to rage, to scream at him, but all she felt was deep exhaustion. James, I don't care if you've changed, she said, her voice steady but cutting. I'm not here to forgive or redeem you. I'm here to say you no longer control me. My life, my happiness, it's mine, not yours. James nodded, his eyes glistening. I know, and I'm proud of you, Emma. Not for me, but for who you are. She left the cafe, feeling as if an invisible weight had lifted. But the drama wasn't over. Days later, Ryan Carter called with news. Vanessa Rose, after her Boston exposure, had resurfaced in Miami under a new identity, advising a major investment fund. Worse, she'd gone on a popular podcast, slamming Emma as a hypocrite posing as a victim. Emma Harper's only good at tearing things down, Vanessa sneered. She's no better than James Thornton. Emma's blood boiled. Vanessa wasn't just evading justice, she was daring to challenge her. She called Ryan immediately. I'm done with this, Ryan. Vanessa thinks she can play the same game again. I'll show her the biggest mistake of her life. Ryan laughed over the phone. You never quit, do you, Harper? I'll dig up everything on her in Miami, but this time, you need backup. I'm thinking, Ethan, he seems to know how to keep you grounded. Emma invited Ethan to Harper Integrity's office, laying out her plan to confront Vanessa. I'm going to Miami, to the conference where she's speaking, and I'm exposing her for good, she said. Ethan met her gaze, a mix of concern and admiration in his eyes. I'm coming with you, he said. Not because I doubt you, but because I want to be there, no matter what happens. Emma nodded, feeling a deeper connection than ever. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Ethan, Ryan, Lily, and her own unbreakable strength. The Miami conference took place in a luxurious beachfront hotel, bathed in golden sunlight and the sound of crashing waves. Vanessa, now Veronica Steele, stood confidently on stage, preaching about building trust in investments. Emma, in a sharp white suit, entered the auditorium just as Vanessa wrapped up. I have a question, Mrs. Steele, Emma called out, her voice cutting through the room. How do you build trust when you were once Vanessa Rose, James Thornton's accomplice in the Thornton Enterprises fraud? The room buzzed with gasps and whispers, Vanessa's face drained of color, her smile faltering. I don't know what you're talking about. Who are you? She stammered. But Emma didn't relent. She projected a slide, emails, transactions, and an audio clip Ryan had uncovered, in which Vanessa admitted her role to a former colleague. You can't run forever, Vanessa, Emma said, her eyes locked on her. The truth always catches up. Security escorted Vanessa out as the audience erupted in applause. Emma stepped off the stage, and Ethan was waiting in the wings, pulling her into a tight hug. "You did it," he whispered. "Now let the past stay there." Back in New York, Emma felt a true sense of relief. She hadn't just defeated Vanessa, she'd conquered her own fear. Sitting with Ethan in her Brooklyn apartment, watching the city lights twinkle through the window, she opened up. "I used to think love was something I couldn't have again," she said softly. "But you make me believe I deserve it." Ethan took her hand, his eyes warm. "Emma, I'm not promising you the world, but I promise to be real with you every single day." For the first time, Emma didn't feel the need to guard herself. She was ready to love, not because she needed someone, but because she'd found herself. Summer 2027 draped New York in vibrant sunlight, as if the city were embracing new beginnings. Emma Harper, now not only a symbol of justice, but a woman who'd found peace within, walked Brooklyn's streets with a gentle smile. Harper Integrity continued to thrive, with new branches in Paris and Singapore, and her story became required reading in business schools worldwide. Ethan Parker, the man who showed her love didn't have to be a game, was now an integral part of her life. Not a savior, but a true partner. But the past always found a way to linger, not to destroy, but to test her one last time. One July afternoon, as Emma prepared for Harper Integrity's annual fundraiser at the Plaza Hotel, Lily called, her voice trembling. "Emma, Mom wants to see you, and I think you should come. It's big." Emma's brow furrowed, a chill running through her. Margaret Thornton, James's mother, hadn't spoken to her since turning her back 3 years ago at the penthouse, blaming Emma for tearing their family apart. But Lily had become a bridge, and their bond had healed many old wounds. Emma arrived at Margaret's home, a stately Upper East Side townhouse once a symbol of Thornton wealth. Margaret greeted her at the door, her silver hair neatly pinned, her eyes no longer sharp but softened, as if time had worn away her anger. "Thank you for coming, Emma," she said, her voice raspy. "I know I have no right to ask, but I need to talk." They sat in the living room, where Thornton family portraits hung on the walls, now mere echoes of a faded dynasty. Margaret slid a small box across the coffee table. Inside were the pearl earrings she'd given Emma before the wedding. "I want you to keep them," she said, her eyes glistening. "Not for James, but because you were the only one in this family brave enough to face the truth. I was wrong to blame you, Emma. James is my son, but you're the strongest person I've ever known." Emma held the earrings, feeling as if a stone had lifted from her heart. "Margaret, I didn't do it to destroy your family," she said softly. "I did it because I couldn't live with lies." Margaret nodded, then unexpectedly took her hand. "I saw James last week," she revealed. "He told me about his book, about what he learned in prison, and he said if it weren't for you, he'd never have changed. I'm not asking you to forgive him, but I want to thank you for saving both of us in your own way." Emma stayed silent, emotions swirling. She no longer hated James, but she didn't need his gratitude. She only needed Margaret, the woman who'd once felt like a mother, back in her life. The drama surged when Lily burst in, clutching a thick folder. "Emma, I found this in Thornton Enterprises' old archives," she said urgently. "It's about Victor Malone and a secret project James worked on. I think it could help the people who lost money because of him." Emma opened the folder, her eyes lighting up as she saw hidden contracts tied to a fund Malone had run. This wasn't just evidence to clear her name, it could restore what Thornton Enterprises had stolen from hundreds of families. Emma looked at Lily, then Margaret, feeling as if a circle had finally closed. "We'll use it," she said, her voice firm. "Not for revenge, but to make things right." Lily grinned, throwing her arms around Emma. "Let's team up, my charity and Harper Integrity. We can do this together." Margaret nodded, her eyes alight with hope. "I'll help too. The Thornton family owes the world too much." For the first time, Emma felt she truly had a family, not bound by blood, but by truth and trust. But the storm wasn't over. One evening, as Emma and Ethan dined at a quaint Greenwich Village restaurant, she got a text from Ryan Carter. "Emma, checked your belly lately? Heard a rumor from an industry source." Emma laughed, assuming it was Ryan's usual teasing, but Ethan's concerned gaze stopped her. "You okay?" he asked, taking her hand. She thought back to the past few weeks. Unusual fatigue, morning nausea she dismissed as work stress. Now, a sudden realization made her heart race. They left the restaurant, stopping at a nearby pharmacy for a pregnancy test. In their Brooklyn apartment, Under warm lamplight, Emma stood in the bathroom, her hands trembling as two red lines appeared. She was pregnant. Ethan knocked gently. "Emma?" She opened the door, tears streaming down her face, not from fear, but from unexpected joy. "You're going to be a dad," she whispered. Ethan froze, then pulled her into a tight embrace, laughing. "And you'll be the best mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. That joy came with a challenge. Sitting with Ethan that night, Emma shared a deep fear. "I used to think I couldn't trust anyone, Ethan. Now, I have to trust myself to be a mom. I'm scared I won't be good enough." Ethan held her hand, his gaze steady. "You've faced James, Vanessa, the whole world. You're not just good enough, you're the strongest person I know. And I'll be here, every step." Emma leaned into him, feeling a safety she'd never known before. The next morning, she called Lily and Margaret with the news. Lily squealed over the phone. "I'm gonna be the coolest aunt!" Margaret cried, whispering, "You've given me a new family, Emma." They planned a small party at Margaret's, not for show, but to celebrate healing. Surrounded by those she loved, Emma's hand resting on her belly, she felt the past. James, Vanessa, the painful days, finally slip away. She hadn't just survived, she'd been reborn. But a mini climax struck just before the party. Ryan called, his voice urgent. "Emma, I found a witness, an old assistant of Malone's. He says Malone's planning to sue you for slander, using fake documents to hit back. You need to move fast." Emma smiled, unshaken. "Let him try," she said. "I've got the truth, Ryan, and this time I'm not fighting alone." She glanced at Ethan, Lily, and Margaret, knowing that no matter who came at her, Malone or anyone else, she had an army, not of power, but of love and trust. Autumn 2028 draped New York in a vibrant orange gold as if the city were celebrating victories and fresh starts. Emma Harper stood on her Brooklyn apartment balcony, her hand resting on her now rounded belly, feeling the gentle kicks of her unborn child. Harper Integrity had become a global leader in business ethics consulting, with offices spanning 5 continents and thousands of companies relying on her to uphold integrity. Ethan Parker, her haven of peace, stood beside her, holding her hand in the soft sunlight. But even as her life glowed with light, shadows of the past crept back, testing her one last time. The small party at Margaret Thornton's months earlier had become a cherished memory, a night where Emma, Ethan, Lily, and Margaret celebrated a family forged not by blood, but by faith. Yet Victor Malone, James's old partner, refused to fade quietly. After Ryan's warning about Malone's legal plans, Emma had braced herself. She knew he wouldn't let go easily. He'd lost everything after her exposure, from reputation to wealth, and now he wanted to drag her down with him. The drama ignited when Malone filed a federal lawsuit against Emma in New York, accusing her of slander and intentional reputational harm. He unleashed a barrage of forged documents, claiming Emma had embezzled from Thornton Enterprises before exposing James, painting her as an opportunist cloaked in justice. The press buzzed, tabloids pounced, questioning whether the ethics queen was as clean as she claimed. Twitter split into camps. #team. Emma rallied behind her, while #Emma the fraud, fueled by Malone, gained traction. Emma felt the weight, not because she feared losing, but because she didn't want her unborn child to grow up under the shadow of lies. She gathered her team, Ryan Carter, Ethan, Lily, and Margaret, at Harper Integrity's Dumbo office. "Malone wants to play dirty," she said, her voice steady despite the strain of her pregnancy, "but I won't let him win. We've got Ryan's witness, Lily's documents, and the truth of what I've done. I want to end this, not just for me, but for everyone who believes in us." Ethan squeezed her hand, his eyes resolute. "You're not alone, Emma. I'm with you, no matter what." Lily waved the Thornton archive files, grinning. "Malone doesn't know I've got this. He's in for a shock." Margaret, with the calm of a seasoned survivor, added, "I'll testify if needed. Thornton Enterprises is my past, but justice is our future." The trial unfolded at Manhattan's federal courthouse, packed with reporters and onlookers eager to witness Emma Harper's final stand. Malone, in an expensive gray suit, sat beside his lawyer, a smug grin on his face. He presented his forged documents with the slickness of a seasoned performer. "Emma Harper's no hero," he declared. "She's a hypocrite who used the Thornton scandal to build her empire." But when Emma's turn came, she took the stand, her pregnant belly prominent in a navy suit, her eyes blazing with an unquenchable fire. "I'm not here to defend my reputation," she began, her voice echoing through the courtroom. I'm here for the truth. Victor Malone isn't a victim. He's a co-conspirator, taking bribes from Thornton Enterprises to bury their fraud. Here's the proof. She unveiled Lily's documents, emails between Malone and James, and testimony from Ryan's witness, a former Malone assistant who confirmed his vengeful fabrications. Malone paled. His lawyers stammered, but they had no defense. Margaret rose to testify, her voice trembling yet resolute. I was once blinded by my son, but I won't be blind to justice. Emma Harper saved my family, and I stand with her. The jury deliberated for just 2 hours before delivering their verdict. Malone lost, fined heavily for falsifying evidence, and ordered to pay damages to Harper Integrity. As the gavel struck, the courtroom exploded in applause. Malone was escorted out, his hateful glare fixed on Emma, but she didn't look back. She hugged Ethan, Lily, and Margaret, tears streaming, not from sorrow, but from knowing she'd won, not just for herself, but for everyone crushed by lies. The following spring, Emma and Ethan married in a simple ceremony at a New York countryside farm, beneath sprawling oak trees. Only a few dozen guests attended, Lily as maid of honor, Margaret beaming in the front row, and Ryan Carter, now self-proclaimed unofficial godfather to their baby. Emma, in a plain white dress, walked down the aisle with Ethan, their hands clasped tight. When the priest asked, "Do you promise to love and honor this person forever?" Emma looked at Ethan, her eyes shining. I do, she said, and this time she knew the promise was real. Even a joyous day couldn't escape a touch of drama. During the reception, a tabloid reporter sneaked in, trying to record Emma for a scoop on the Thornton saga. "Ms. Harper, have you really moved on, or is this just a new act?" he sneered. Emma turned, her smile unwavering. "The past is a lesson, not a burden," she replied calmly. "Today, I'm choosing happiness. You should try that instead of digging through trash." The guests roared with laughter. The reporter was ushered out, and Ethan pulled her close, whispering, "You're one of a kind." 10 months later, Emma stood on a stage at an international business ethics conference in London, her daughter Sophie Harper Parker sleeping soundly in a stroller off stage. Before thousands, Emma shared her story, not as a victim, but as a victor. "I once thought revenge meant destroying those who hurt me," she said, her voice ringing out. "I was wrong. The greatest revenge is building a better world from what they left behind, a world of truth, love, and hope." The audience rose in a standing ovation, some wiping tears, and Ethan, standing by Sophie, waved to her, his eyes brimming with pride. As Emma stepped down, she scooped up her daughter and hugged her husband, gazing at London's sky aglow with dusk.